Liviamo, un'eia e ti carici che l'erezza e fiora e la fuccer e vogliona si le via vogliota.
Liviamne darci ferramenti che suscita l'amore, poiché quello che la cora onnipotente va. Liviamo, amore, ama fra la calici più cardiva ci avrà. Liviamo, fra la calici più cardiva ci avrà.
Tra voi saprò dividere il tempo mio giocondo. Tutto è follie, follie nel mondo, ciò che non è piacer.
Vogliam fugaci rapido, e il gaviote l'amore, e il fiore che nasce muore, nel più si pagota.
Godiamo, ci invita una fervida cent'olio signerà.
Godiamo la tazza, il cantico, la notte bella e il riso. In questo paradiso ne scoprai nuovo di.
La vita è tipo Dio,
Quando non sami ancora,
non lo dite a chi l'ignora,
è mio destin così.
in questo paradiso ne scopre nuovo di. Ne scopre di. Ne scopre di. Così.
And now the end is near. I saw a face, the final curtain.
My friend, I'll say it clear, I'll state my case, of which I'm certain.
I've lived a life that's full. I've traveled each and every highway.
And more, much more than this, I did it my way.
Regrets, I've had a few, but then again, too few to mention. I did what I had to do, and so it's true, without exemption.
I planned each charted course, each careful step along the byway, and more, much more than this, I did it my way.
Yes, there were times, I'm sure you knew, when I be told more than I could choose.
But truth it all, when there was doubt, I did up and spit it out. I face it all, and I still tall, I did it my way.
Alone, I left and cried. I had my fill, my share of losing.
And now, as the tears subside, I find it all so amusing
To think I did all that, and may I say, not in a shy way.
Oh no, not me, I did it my way.
But what is a man? What has he got? If not himself, then he has not to say the things he truly feels, and not the words of one who kneels. The record shows I took up an oath and did it my way.
Колко нощи аз не спах, колко друми извървях да се върна.
Колко песни аз изпях, колко мъка изживях да се върна.
В моята хубава страна, майка, татко и жена да прегърна.
Там под родното небе чака моето дете да се върна. Моя страна, моя България, моя любов, моя България, моя тъга, моя България. При теб ме праща вечно любовта.
Даже не иде по света, неизвестен да умра, ще се върна.
Моята хубава страна, и тревата, и пръста да прегърна.
Нека стана стръкче цвят, нека вятъра познат ме прегърне.
Нека родните поля да ме срещнат с песента, щом се върна. Моя страна, моя България, моя любов, моя България, моя тъга, вечно любовь та. Моя страна, моя Болгария, моя любовь, моя Болгария, моя тага, моя Болгария, притемне гражда вечно любовь та.
Dear Commissioner Gabriel, dear Professor Pető, what an overture into your evening. Isn't that great? And Professor Rewalski, what a fantastic idea to organize this for this evening. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that you did not join in singing. Deputy Minister Dimov, Deputy Mayor of the city Todor Shobanov, finally, dear Luisa, dear Alberto, delegates of the ALLEA academies, ladies and gentlemen and friends. It is my great honor to welcome you to this 5th ALLEA Madame de Staël Prize for Cultural Values Award ceremony here tonight in this beautiful venue of the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences. I'm very glad to be able to share and celebrate with you the outstanding academic contributions of Professor Andrea Pető in the field of gender studies, though really the impact of her research reaches far beyond her discipline. ALLEA is proud to be able to award this prize now in the 5th year running to highlight some, though not nearly all, of the excellent work that the academics across the continent are producing on the topic of European identity, whichever form it may take. We are also happy because awarding this prize would not have been possible without the co-sponsorship of the Compagnia di San Paolo, which graciously reviewed and renewed their support this year for this important endeavor. My dear friend and president of the Academy of the Lincei, Alberto Quattrocurcio, who has been very helpful in this endeavor, will address you on behalf of the foundation in just a minute. And I'm also thankful again to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences, which is hosting us not only tonight, but also at our symposium earlier today and tomorrow with great hospitality and care. If you did not notice it before, now after this singing, you know how much effort they have put into this meeting. Dear President Rewalski, I can only repeat my thanks from this morning. It is now just as appropriate as it was in the morning. Likewise, I want to point out that while I stand before you as a member of the prize jury, my fellow jury members have discussed in great detail the merits of all candidates, all of whom would have been deserving of today's honor. I'm therefore very grateful for all of their work, including Luisa Passerini, our first Madame de Staël laureate and jury member, will give a much more knowledgeable laudation on Andrea Pető later on. Madame Germaine de Staël could not be a better representative to illustrate the importance of Andrea Pető's work of unsilencing women in their historical context. Her story, her life, is one of challenging the status quo, using her unwavering will to oppose Napoleon Bonaparte, certainly the most powerful man of his time, and using her outstanding intellect to bring together great thinkers in her famous salons. When we first set up this prize, our search for a namesake quickly arrived at Madame de Staël, for the values she upheld throughout her life were the same as the ones we would like to see in our laureates. We feel and we felt that the prize should be awarded to scholars whose scholarly works contributed in one way or another towards the creation, maintenance, or preservation of a better Europe, guided by humanistic ideals and understanding of common bonds between the nations on our continent. Her life's journey from France to Switzerland, her marriage to a Swede, and her keen interest in Germany influenced her extensive bibliography, encompassing a wide range of publications from novels to political essays and everything in between. Though her probably most famous work was a theory of Romanticism, her influence goes far beyond that, as her clear vision and understanding of overarching societal issues place her among the most noteworthy personalities of her time. Back in 2014, at the first ALLEA Prize Award ceremony, we were delighted to have chosen such a prolific scientist as Luisa Passerini. Luisa is not only previous laureate and engaged member of the prize jury, she is first and foremost a groundbreaking historian whose work has taken her all across the globe before she settled at the European University Institute in Florence. Much like Andrea Pető, Luisa is fascinated by the concept of memory and remembrance, particularly with regards to questions of gender and diasporic subjectives. Clearly, we could not have asked for a more capable person to sing Professor Pető's praise this evening. As an association with a truly European perspective, our relationship with the European institutions is naturally of great importance to us in all of our activities. We are therefore pleased and honored to welcome a representative of the European Commission here tonight, the European Commissioner for Digital Economy and Society, Maria Gabriel, who came all the way from Brussels to hand over the prize to Andrea Pető, another gift to you. Maria Gabriel's initiative on the digital single market, the establishment of a high-level group on fake news, as well as her campaign, No Women, No Panel. Actually, in the afternoon, we succeeded to follow this principle. They are all closely related to many of ALLEA's recent activities, and as the youngest currently serving commissioner, she brings a wave of fresh air in the way the Commission thinks and acts on those and hopefully also on other issues. We are looking forward to working with her in the future and even more so to hear her speak today. Before I pass the baton to Alberto, I would like to take this moment to personally congratulate Andrea Pető to this prize. Her academic pedigree certainly speaks for herself, and I believe that exploring the relationship between gender and memory, and thereby making the voices of so many women heard who were previously ignored, is in and of itself not just worthy of our praise, but indeed a necessary activity. Similarly necessary, and another sign of the Andrea Pető's strength of character, was her resistance with her peers to the Lex CEU, the Central European University, which was passed in Hungary last year and which almost led to the closure of this prestigious university in Budapest, which for a while was also my university when I served on its board of trustees. Her work on unsilencing oppressed groups can only flourish when academics are free to pursue their research unimpeded by higher powers, no matter if they are governmental, economical, or indeed societal. Andrea Pető's discipline of gender studies and her university are both examples why we need academic freedom and why all of us need to fight to ensure academic freedom. With that off my chest, I would now like to invite Alberto Quattrocurcio on the stage to say a few words on behalf of our co-sponsor, the Compagnia di San Paolo. Thank you very much and enjoy the evening.
Good afternoon to all, and thanks to the Bulgarian Academy of Sciences for this splendid meeting of ALLEA, and my congratulations to the winner of the prize, who goes on with a fantastic set of winners of such prize. I bring here the official appreciation and greetings of the president of Compagnia San Paolo, who has co-sponsored the prize for the last 2 years. Compagnia San Paolo, just 2 words, is the biggest Italian foundation and was started at the beginning of 16th century. Why Compagnia San Paolo co-sponsored such prize? I have 2 reasons to explain why. The first reason is that Compagnia San Paolo has always had a very keen attention to the European values, since all times, not just now. The second reason is that Lincei has done what they could do to support the idea to co-sponsor, because also Lincei are very keen to all European values, and because they trusted quite a lot Günther Stock. Günther Stock has been elected president of ALLEA in 2012 in Rome at Lincei Academy, and in a certain way Günther has been a kind of honorary member of Lincei since then. But more than that, I have experienced as a member of jury, and more than experienced, I have been pleased to consider how judgment, how cleverness, and how insight he had in running the jury. In 5 years, I have really appreciated the work of Günther, who, in my opinion, has been really able to reach with this prize the so important motivation which are at the roots of the prize itself. I take the occasion also to greet Günther not only as the president of the jury, but for the splendid work he has done in the last 6 years as president of ALLEA. Many thanks for what you have done as the president of the jury and president of ALLEA. Thank you.
Good evening, and first of all, warm thanks for starting this ceremony with one of my favorite arias from Verdi's La Traviata. That was really a gift. Thank you so much. And warm thanks also to Günther for his generous words. I am exceedingly pleased tonight of having the honor to present this laudatory speech. But let me address your authorities, eminent European Commissioner, President Günther Stock, Professor Quattrocurcio, and all participants, but especially Andrea Pető. It is particularly apt to dedicate this year's prize to Andrea Pető, because the name of Germaine de Staël is linked with a particular intellectual aspect which has become of total importance to us today, which is the link between the emancipation of women and the creation of a liberal and democratic society. And in her thought, as feminist scholarship has clarified in the last 15 years, these two aspects are always connected, not only for what concerns the nation, but also for what concerns Europe. So she was acutely aware of national, racial, and gender differences, and she concentrated much of her reflection on understanding the convergences of such differences. This is, as I say, of utmost importance today when we no longer, we meaning feminist scholars, gender scholars, we no longer talk of gender in isolation. We always talk of gender in connection with other categories of difference, class, nation, age. And this is called with a technical word, which is intersectionality, but it is really very important that the centrality of gender is not in isolation. It's in connection with all these other intellectual, conceptual categories. And so gender and the political and social order in the early 19th century were at the heart of Madame de Staël's thought. But this conjunction is also at the heart of the historical research done by Andrea Pető in various fields, and it continues to be a crucial preoccupation of her activities as a feminist public intellectual. Along on this same line is her concern about the link between the current illiberalism in Central Europe and the anti-gender campaigns in many European countries. Her recent work is dedicated to this, and so is the tendency, her attention to the tendency to substitute family mainstreaming to gender mainstreaming. Andrea Pető has joined her voice with the increasing presence of political actors rejecting liberal democracy, has joined her voice to the battle for the symbolic control of the human rights discourse and the implementation of equal rights across Europe. She wrote an ego-histoire, an intellectual little history of herself, edited in a book by Kathy Davis and Mary Evans called Transatlantic Conversations, because there were feminist scholars from various parts of the Atlantic. And she remembers in that ego history that she always wanted to be a historian, since she was a teenager, actually. And I would like to add an oral historian, like myself, since much of her work has been based on oral memory. No wonder she insists in this autobiographical remembrance on the importance of the radio for her political formation. She says that at 16 years of age, she listened to Radio Free Europe, which helped to create her words, her political self. And more specifically, she evokes listening to the news when the army crushed the Solidarity movement in Poland with her father, who had been a prisoner after the 1956 uprising. Her interest for orality and for direct relationships with people brought Andrea to a degree in sociology at the University of Budapest, ELTE, and her work in this field started with interviewing Roma people. However, she also wrote a thesis on 17th century English utopian movement. This conjunction, the interest for the past, and the strong attention to social and political burning questions of the present is something that I find recurrently distinctive of Andrea's work. In the same tone, she defines herself a deeply political animal, feeling part of the generation of 1989. Following her political interest, she often found herself the only woman in the group, as in the case of the so-called flying universities, meetings held since the 1960s in private apartments by intellectuals that were banned from teaching. She became engaged with these meetings in the 1980s, but she left them because disappointed by what she judged as a neoliberal equation of privileged consumption, I'm quoting, and political liberty. Actually, this privileged consumption were things like having a fridge. And it is striking to me that in this story, a memory story of daily life, the roles are reversed because the men are concerned with keeping the butter in the fridge, and the woman is concerned with political liberalism, and she leaves them. Anyway, this rebellion was one of the components that led her towards feminism, but the other was the experience of breastfeeding her son Oliver, who was born in 1989, while friends and comrades were on the barricades participating in the collapse of communism. Again, this personal turn of her life was linked with intellectual and political research, and she wrote a dissertation at the Central European University on employment and women. In the early 1990s, she started teaching courses in this university after periods of study in Oxford and contacts with historians from the United States, courses on women's history in Eastern Europe in the history department. I personally met Andrea in the early 2000s when I was professor of history at the European University Institute in Florence. And Andrea was part of a project funded by the Fifth Framework program that I directed on women migrants across Europe, women as subjects of migration and marriage. The aspect of migration was linked also to the question of sentiments, love, emotions. And this research project actually intended to open new perspectives on Europeanness, connecting the inspiration of pioneers like Ursula Hirschman, who talked about the emotion of being European, with the emotions of present-day women who move across Europe. The research was done in Bulgaria, Hungary, Denmark, the Netherlands, and Italy. In Bulgaria, it was Miglena Nikolchina, who is here now. In Budapest, it was Andrea who directed, with great expertise, a research group working on the Hungarian diaspora. And we ended up with a book, came out in 2007, Women Migrants from East to West, to which Andrea contributed with a brilliant piece on food talk as a marker of identity and a frame of narrating difference and belonging, another sign of her versatility. She was also Jean Monnet Fellow at the European University in the academic year 2001 and 2, and so I had the chance to know better her and her work, as well as her son Oliver, who was then a 12 years old adolescent attending school in Florence. Since then, I was able to observe Andrea's competence on several topics of European relevance across various fields of studies, as well as the international dimension of her researching and teaching, and to appreciate her approach in conjugating themes like Europe and gender. One of the intellectual capacities of Andrea Pető is indeed to gender historical phenomena, as well as questions of remembering, silencing, and forgetting in innovative ways that shed new light on their history. This is evident, especially in her work on the cluster of notions and historical concepts like Holocaust, memory, and gender, which is of particular significance for Europe and Europeans today. This moving across fields has been acknowledged by Andrea herself, who has observed that she has always had research questions rather than simply a competence within a particular field of historical period. Her first book on the Hungarian women's movement in 45-51 published in 1998 in Hungarian, in 2003 in English, was grounded in women's social history. Her second book was an exploration on the life and memory of Julia Reich, whose husband had been one of the executed during Hungary's first Stalinist show trial in 1949. This book testifies to the relevance of memory politics in Andrea Pető's work and her contribution on competing memory cultures, something that we see ongoing all the time today. I cannot list all of her books, just say that she has 6 authored books, 31 edited ones, almost 300 essays and articles. But I want to remember especially mention one recent accomplishment of Andrea as editor. The handbook, big book, on gender and war came out last year, an outstanding achievement in putting together an interdisciplinary sequence of 22 chapters on various aspects of this dyad. Equally valuable is her research, which has come out in various articles, but will in a few weeks be published in a new book on memory and the narrative of rape in Budapest and Vienna in 1945 after the liberation by the Red Army. Soviet soldiers committed innumerable acts of rape. I say innumerable because Andrea is right in refusing to go into the numerical aspect of this question. There is a whole debate based on the estimate that 10% of the female population in Budapest was raped. But Andrea does not want rightly to enter this question because she concentrates on the analysis of silence as well as of identity and alterity, who is the other in this case, and the public and private aspect of memories of this type of violence. The book based on interviews conducted by the author and many primary and secondary sources in the striking documentation. Andrea Pető was a young scholar when I first met her, while she is now a fully affirmed intellectual figure who has traveled to almost every country in Europe. She is presently professor in the Department of Gender Studies at Central European University in Budapest and Doctor of Science of the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. At some point during the late 2000, I lost a personal contact with her. We were going to different fields, but I kept following some of her production. And while trying to update my knowledge of her activities for the present talk, I was struck by the vastity of her engagement in things European, both scientifically and institutionally. She is present and active in many European journals, in European conferences and workshops, in associations and institutions that go from Euroclio in Romania and the EU Directorate General Research, but also to Horizon 2020, in which she served as an advisor from 2014. And also she has been serving in various European groups on gender in the field of science, technology, and environment. I am really impressed by the international scope of her experience and recognitions, with prevalence of the European dimension, although of course her literature, her references are from all over the world. And I am impressed by the fact that Andrea Pető can work across linguistic boundaries, since she is knowledgeable not only in Hungarian, but in English, Russian, and German. And of course, her international engagement does not reduce her presence in Hungary, where she has been involved in publishing volumes in English, Russian, and Hungarian. I particularly value her engagement with topics concerning Eastern and Central Europe and their role in the European Union. I like her argument that the dynamics of the return to Europe of the former communist countries should be understood in a perspective allowing parallels between East and West, without dismissing national dissimilarities. I also appreciate her insistence that, while little is known of this to English-speaking audiences, many advances in scholarship are taking place in Central and Eastern Europe. And perhaps the hope is that this prize helps to overcome this gap of knowledge. Last but not least, I admire her dedication to teaching in many universities all over Europe, often using in her classes digital techniques and educational films. In fact, she also participated in preparing the brochure Tuning Educational Structures in Europe for Degree Programs. I'm going to conclusion, addressing Andrea directly. I think we share a common interest for establishing a gendered genealogy of thought, which includes women like Germaine de Staël, Ursula Hirschman, Julia Reich, but does not exclude men. I have always had in this genealogy of thought which recognizes the importance of gender and recognizes the importance of emotions, sentiments, and feelings for Europe. Denis de Rougemont, one of my Europeanists, but also I want to add today, because we are here, Frank Thompson, who acted as a liaison officer between the British Army and the Bulgarian partisans during the Second World War and was executed in 1944 in Litakovo. And he was a very young man, brother of the better known Edward P. Thompson, who had Europe very much at heart, and he spoke about the Europe of the heart, and also had plans about the possibility of teaching languages in such a way as to make everybody in Europe understand each other, if everybody learned 3 languages in either a passive or active way. I would like to conclude by stating that I share a hope which a few years ago Andrea Pető expressed in these terms. We can hope, she wrote, that trans-European transactions will continue to flourish with dignity, empowering generations of women ready to implement change in spite of the difficult times ahead of us. My warm congratulations to you, Andrea.
President Rewalski, President Stock, Professor Pető, Vice Minister Dimov, Deputy Mayor Chobanov, dear professors, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, it's a great honor for me to be with you today. Professor Pető, we are all impressed by your achievements, your results, your engagement, and your energy. Thank you very much for inspiring us. It's always not an easy task to talk after the presentation of such a huge work. But for me today, as a European Commissioner for Digital Economy and Society, it's a great occasion to share with you, first of all, my respect for our European researchers and scientists. I fully believe that the excellence of European science and researchers, it's one of our added value as our own European way to do, today and in the future. At the same time, the organizers asked me to touch some important topics on which I'm working every day. The first one, it was about fake news. And I suppose that the link is very direct with values. Because actually, if there is a threat, first of all, for our democratic values, is this not new phenomenon, but phenomenon with new speed and with new dimensions. That's why for me, it's a pleasure just to share with you some thoughts on that. On the other hand, we talk about culture, about identity, about Europe. And for me, it will be a pleasure the same to share with you some of our experiences in the European Commission and how we see the support that is needed in this sector and at the same time what we can do more. So first of all, I would like to say that yes, digitization is an enormous opportunity for innovation, for growth, for new services, for jobs, but at the same time, digitization is a risk for more social exclusion, for more exclusion of women, and my objective is really that thanks to the digitization, no one should be left behind. That's why we need to think about all those changes which intervened with the technological changes. First of all, I would like to say that accelerating technological change intertwined with globalization is putting immense stress on human adaptability. It took 30 years from the Wright brothers' first flight until the modern airline network was put in place. Whereas Google is just 20 years old and Facebook less than 15, and both have billions of customers already. Ray Kurzweil predicts that technological progress will speed up further. Brian Arthur argues that technologies combined with other technologies will lead to yet more technologies causing yet more change. Sociologists offer their own big picture explanations. Manuel Castells wrote on how time and space used to form a unity for pre-modern men, but gradually the two have separated as events in other time zones, and particularly time set by networks, has influenced human behavior. Anthony Giddens' analysis goes in the same direction. Modernity undercuts traditional habits and customs. In that case, the question is, how should public policy respond? Technology may change, but our fundamental values last. I strongly believe that public intervention is important to steer the development of technology and society in line with these values. Just like the scientific method and the ethos of rational inquiry, our European values are rooted in the Enlightenment. Disinformation has emerged as a threat to truthful reporting and transparency of public action, essential for both science and democratic discourse. It erodes public trust in institutions and trust in digital and traditional media. Disinformation harms our democracies by hampering the ability of citizens to make informed decisions. As journalists say, you are entitled to your own opinions, but not your own facts. Fake news or disinformation, as we should more precisely call it, is about making up facts to deceive. So what we can do more? At the European Commission, we started to tackle this challenge because today more than 83% of European citizens considers that disinformation is a threat for our democratic values. So we need to do something. That's why now for 6 months we managed to organize a lot of roundtables. I established a high-level expert group, and actually three weeks ago we published a communication and we said it very clearly. We would like to have a European approach because disinformation and all those new phenomena, they don't know borders. That's why it's important to act together. Now, when we talk about values, we need to talk immediately about responsibility. And in this world of new technologies, there is a responsibility for every actor engaging in the process, for platforms, for social media, for journalists, for researchers. We count on you because, for example, we propose the creation of a European network of fact-checkers. We would like to establish an online secure platform where researchers can exchange best practices, where we can elaborate our communication strategy, where we can just inform our citizens about our memories, about huge examples that we have in our history, and I really count on you for succeed in this initiative. Another important thing for me, as I already said it, is the role of culture and identity. Culture today needs to be more supported by public institutions. Culture can help people to feel more grounded and link them back to tradition and heritage. It also provides a lens for viewing the future. At a point when populism is on rise and increasing polarization, culture can help citizens to embrace society in all its complexity and the beauty of diversity. This year is our European Year of Cultural Heritage. That's why it's important now to be more active, to be more supportive, and to have more initiatives. Culture helps us to reach out to other identities and to see different feats of our own. Culture can help to prove that digital is much more than an enabler of hatred or disinformation. When digital meets culture, it unleashes positive forces, building bridges within societies and among societies. Digital is the primary way we have today to create and spread culture. A major part of my job is to make Europe's culture and creative sector fully embrace and exploit the digital revolution, and to shape digital so it becomes a suitable environment for culture to flourish and be enjoyed by as many citizens as possible. Actually, we are working on implementing what we call our Digital for Culture strategy, using the potential of digital to empower the positive economic and societal effects of culture. The next iteration of the media program will be an important part of Digital for Culture. Those of you who love European cinema will certainly have seen credits for the Europeans media program in the closing credits of European films. Media enables European films and other audiovisual works, including documentaries and new media, to find markets beyond national and European borders. And when we talk about films, actually, as the European Commissioner, I'm asking for a support for two new ideas. The first one is to establish a European directory for European films, where all our experiences in the history, in the present, can be more visible. I would like to increase this unbelievable cultural diversity that we have in Europe. Now, we have an agreement with all stakeholders, and the objective is to start the prototype in October this year. On the other side, the last few months were marked by our internal negotiations with the Commission about the next multi-annual financial framework. We all know how important is the financing for research, for innovation, for culture. And thanks to my team, to my personal efforts, we can see now a real increased budget for media program, 30%. For the first time, we have the biggest budget for innovation and research, more than 100 billion euros. And when we talk about digital, for me it's really important that this strategy, Digital for Culture, all those programs linked to values now are supported even with financial instruments for the next 7 years. I fully count on the support of member states, of your categories of academy, but for me it will be really important now to raise our voice as only one. Another important point, and we all talk about this, that enlightenment values are hard to live up to, and dare I say it, there were 1 or 2 omissions in the original scheme, notably the lack of female empowerment. Today we celebrate a prize named after a woman who was present at the French National Constituent Assembly when the Declaration of the Rights of the Man and of the Citizen was adopted in 1789. But Madame de Staël could not extend those rights to women as well as men. There was a lot of catching up to do. Gender studies have contributed massively here, adding a new lens to social science inquiry. By revisiting history through her work and even writing engagingly about gender in the European Union treaties, Professor Pető is correcting that omission for a future where female empowerment will play an even more important role. For me, it's a great pleasure to celebrate Professor Pető's success in bridging the Enlightenment and Information age. When I became a commissioner, one of my first questions it was, is there any European strategy in which women are taken into account? In this digital era, the answer was no. The first answer immediately after, it was that there is no enough time to do it before the end of the mandate. I never accepted this answer. And 5 months later, we published, together with my team, a new European strategy, Women in Digital Era. And Professor Pető, I'm convinced that your work will be extremely helpful for all of us, because we know that we don't start at zero. We have all those values, experiences, personalities. Thanks to your work, we can really put forward our best experiences in Europe. And we can continue to build on this experience. So thank you very much. Thank you for showing us that thanks to our extraordinary personalities in Europe, we can continue in this digital era by putting at the heart of our policies the human being and our values to continue to be a leader. Thank you very much. Most important moment. It's a great honor for me. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. Dear European Commissioner Maria Gabriel, dear Professor Günther Stock, dear Professor Luisa Passerini, ladies and gentlemen. Many people were part of my journey to becoming the first Hungarian to accept this prestigious prize. Among the most important ones is Professor Miglena Nikolčina of the Sofia University. During the 27 years I spent at Central European University in Budapest, Miglena Nikolčina was the most supportive department head I ever had the chance to work with. It is a pleasure that she is here in this historical chamber, rejoicing with me. There are many more people to whom I could express my gratitude. In such a rare moment of success, it is crucial to remember that as women scientists, we are standing on the shoulders of great women predecessors. Such a great woman predecessor was Madame de Staël. Yet somehow she was omitted from the same literary and political canon which through the past decades she assembled. Sappho, Toni Morrison, Jane Austen, Virginia Woolf, Gertrude Stein, Anna Akhmatova, and Emily Bronte. I have examined university syllabi, but found no trace of Madame de Staël works. Although she had significant literary oeuvre, her lived experiences, her human qualities, mark her lasting legacy. In the following, I will demonstrate the ways in which her oeuvre is still relevant for us today, as well as the consequences of her decades-long omission from the canon. I will do so by juxtaposing the life of Anne-Louise Germaine de Staël-Holstein, or Germaine, as I will from now on almost intimately address her in this speech, with the life of Julia Roig, my biography of whom is available in German and Bulgarian. This is the cover of the Bulgarian translation, was the wife of László Roig, the Hungarian Minister of Interior Affairs, executed during the country's first Stalinist show trials in 1949. Julia was the one who ensured that László Roig and his comrades would receive proper reburial after their bodies were hastily reposed in an unmarked grave in a forest near Budapest. This event became the grand rehearsal of the 1956 revolution. Julia relentlessly fought against the murder of her husband and of Prime Minister Imre Nagy. She established a civil organization, spoke out against the planned sanctioning of reproductive rights, organized talk circles, and took her imprisoned friends' children out for ice cream. Untypically for the era, she donated the whole sum of the compensation for her husband's murderer, which she received from her former comrades, to establishing people's colleges. These colleges functioned as government-independent institutions and provided institutions for talented but poor youth. Germaine was born into a privileged family as the daughter of the well-known French finance minister Necker. Perhaps it is also her class privilege that makes her unfit for the above-listed literary canon. As she was a woman in the 18th century France, she received no formal education. Instead, she was tutored by governesses and by her mother. Julia, on the other hand, was born into a poor Budapest working-class family, yet she also received her political education from her family. Another uniting feature is that both of them were in their true element when having conversations in salons. The elite salon life of the Enlightenment was an asylum that offered intellectual thrill to those opposed to the former hierarchies reigning over state institutions. During the Hungarian communist dictatorship, family and friend circles, parties, and later flying universities were the spaces in which small resistant groups that fought for more just country were formed. These small spaces, like an apartment exhibit or theater, were not only suitable for strengthening one's own commitment, but also for the marking of boundaries between oneself and others, and for the evaluation of others' systems of values. This was that alternative public space that Julia organized, and this is Germain's and Julia's common heritage, a value-based political activism that challenges traditional spaces and often uses them for its own purposes. It is also the intellectual heritage of the European political life, although clearly part of this heritage and atypical women's lives' destinies are still not entering the canon. We need to reconsider this heritage because there are two imminent dangers facing the rules and practice of science, or in other words, the canon itself. One of the dangers is that in more and more countries, the state is becoming a fugitive of illiberalism. To this, that this new mode of governance will not influence scientific life elsewhere, or this is its questioning of the contents, institutions, social relevance, and therefore state funding of knowledge will stop at the borders would be an error. When this is being executed, as currently the case, then the elite that has been selected through various institutional and less institutional processes, and as the representatives of which we are here today, can choose among different courses of action. One can politely suppress a disdainful smile when reading about how incompetent minions are placed on the heads of well-playing state institutions, just like in the time of Germain. Or one may hope that the politically motivated withdrawal of financial support that makes real intellectual work impossible in many notable institutions will be temporary, just like Julia's contemporaries did. One may hope that the elite unlocked within the ivory towers of science, that is, the scientific institutions, will be able to keep the populist powers of alternative scientific discourse at bay. I hold that this is self-deception. In a number of countries, the very foundation of science, the freedom of expression, and truth-seeking are criminalized or delegitimated by the state. The existent European system of scientific institutions has always considered the raising of enlightened and educated citizens as its primary task. This enlightening tradition was and is easy to break. This is the first danger. The second danger is that our over-bureaucratized neoliberal universities, with their impact factor obsessions and their conveyor belt style teaching, while being apt at many things, are no longer suitable for raising responsible critical thinkers. Goethe himself, embedded in this era's institutional systems, wrote somehow condescendingly about his encounter with Germaine. I quote Goethe. She was in her element when she could philosophize in a salon. But what is the worth of such speculations? Does it require anything more than some talent to chat in a sparkly and spirited way about inscrutinizable questions? In this, she found a great pleasure that almost bordered passion, end quote. But who can talk about and think about science in a way that almost borders passion, when scientists suffocated by administrational tasks are annually valued with index markers? According to the memoirs of an eyewitness, Germaine raised her own children in this passion spirit. I quote, "Each of them studied whatever they felt like studying," end quote. This would be the kind of education founded on rigorous intellectual work, on passion and voluntarism that I myself had received in the seminars of the Budapest flying universities during communism. This is the tradition represented by the Central European University that I'm a committed professor of for 27 years now. This passionate and free approach to science necessarily gets into conflict with that hierarchical control of education which sees citizens as subjects to be kept under surveillance at all times, just as it has happened in the case of the Central European University. And this is where I would like to say a heartfelt thank you to each of you individually and to the organization of ALLEA for supporting the CEU during this tough period. The freedom of science and passion together open up the possibility of intellectual resistance. Science is not an absolute system, where the rejection of the system would automatically become part of the system itself. And any criticism of the system would be immediately discredited by the fact that it arrived from outside of the system. It did not matter that Germaine's valet, Joseph Guigné, and her maid, Olive Guigné, were both covert informers of Fouché, the powerful French Minister of Police. For decades, this married couple were sometimes Germaine's sole confidants, who organized her literary, financial, and love life. It was through them that she sent what she thought were secret messages to publishers and lovers. And they took the sheets of her writing to the press. Similarly, it did not matter that Julia was aware that her phone was wiretapped, her letters were read, and her best friend reported on her to the state security. Despite this, or perhaps exactly because of this, they unrelentlessly organized, talked, and wrote. Both Julia and Germaine refused to compromise their values in order to make a deal with power. I quote, "If there was a public trial, there should be a public trial. There should be a public burial, let me repeat. If there was a public trial, there should be a public reburial," end quote, said Julia persistently when they tried to persuade her to have her husband reburied in a close circle of family and friends. In one of her most significant works, Corinne, Germaine revealed the decline of the Napoleonic era's intellectual life. She also rejected Fouché's advice to insert a few words praising the emperor's brilliance and victories, despite Fouché's having made vague promises to Germaine that, I quote Fouché, "every obstacle will be removed and all of her wishes will be fulfilled," end quote. Neither Julia nor Germaine were willing to exercise self-censorship. Baron Vogt, in his letter on her d'Allemagne, warned Germaine, I quote, "It would be better if you kept your distance with political topics, if you did not express your hatred against tyranny as you do in all your works. I would like your work to appear entirely innocent, so it would disarm your critics and take away the edge of malevolence," end quote. Germaine did not follow this friendly advice, and her work was prohibited. Still, she managed to flee the country together with his shrewdly hid manuscript, which she then published elsewhere, achieving huge international success. As it should be appeared by now, both of these women, Germaine and Julia, were exceptional and brave women who deployed the possibilities offered by alternative public spaces for value-based politics and for living life with dignity. The question is, why are they missing from historiography? Why were they forgotten? But are they really forgotten? After all, Germaine, as the daughter of the illustrious financial minister Necker, as the leader of the renowned Salon, in other words, as the provider of space for celebrated men where they could exercise their intellect, is present in history books. Similarly, Julia is also present on the iconic picture taken at László Rajk's funeral as a grieving wife and mother. However, I'm thinking of a different canon. Both Germaine and Julia devoted their lives to fight against a tyrant, Napoleon and Kadar respectively. They did so by being fugitives of paradoxes. In 1813, when Germaine was forced into exile by Napoleon, she sought support in London. There she sided with the English government, which was fighting against the common enemy, Napoleon, and not with the English liberal opposition, who saw that, I quote, leader of the people in Napoleon, who was destined to ruin the decayed structures of obsolete monarchies, end quote. Germaine put her dilemma thus, I quote her, to betray your country or to support the tyrant? This is the question. She wrote to Benjamin Constant, I quote, what kind of a French person would rely on Cossack bayonets, but still capable of wishing to see Cossacks parading on the streets of Racine, end quote. Julia remained committed to leftist communist values through her entire life. She fought against the Kadar regime because it demolished and corrupted leftism. She did all in her might to protect dissent thinkers with her personal authority. Those same thinkers abandoned the leftist tradition in favor of neoliberal transition in 1989. For Julia, expressing political truth, naming who is a tyrant and who is not, was of primary importance. She also doubtlessly believed in equality. Likewise, Germaine was committed to her country, to freedom, to patriotism and equality, and condemned Napoleon, who misappropriated these values and sent millions to die on the battlefield. She wrote, I quote Germaine, I can feel an almost physical joy when opposing an unjust power, end quote. We can all derive strength from this individual physical joy. And we need to derive strength for our value-based fight, just like Germaine and Julia did, because they knew that it will be a long one. There is but one thing we cannot avoid when it comes to a fight: fighting it. Not fighting would mean the loss of our right to the passionate protection of free science, which is the foundation of all scientific work. Thank you again for the prize. Thank you.
We are now waiting for the grand finale, and after that we meet all together in the Archaeological Museum. I hope you find your way in a short period of time, hopefully. Thank you.
workshop.